Josephine and Jace first hooked up during a graduation bash, back when she had just started dating Caden. That night, Caden had knocked himself out with alcohol and was peacefully snoozing away in one of the rooms just a couple of hours into the party. It was at this opportune moment that Jace, Caden's best buddy, and Josephine, his favorite girl, succumbed to their unexpected desires. Instantly, they both grasped the gravity of their actions and solemnly pledged to bury the memory, vowing to keep it hidden, especially from Caden. Josephine truly honored her word, completely erasing that evening from her life and memory. However, Jace didn't quite manage that feat. Time and time again, he would bring it up, attempting to seduce her once more. But Josephine held firm, relentlessly reminding the hopeless lover that Caden was, in fact, his friend. Finally, a few years later, Jace succeeded in persuading Josephine to repeat their tryst. And then, as if by fate, Jace enlisted in the army and served there for several more years under contract. Relieved and hopeful, the girl wished for Jace to find a new life in a distant town, far from her and Caden's tranquil existence. A year breezed by, and the couple joyously exchanged vows, sealing their love with marriage. Not long afterward, Josephine gleefully presented her husband with a pregnancy test that gleamed with 2 vibrant pink lines. 9 months later, Caden cradled a beautiful baby girl in his arms, a spitting image of himself. However, he often lamented that his best friend, Jace, missed these monumental moments, unable to leave his job to attend the wedding or the birth of his daughter. While they stayed connected through phone calls and text messages, Caden yearned for more personal interactions. Unexpectedly, Jace re-entered their lives when he showed up at their doorstep one day, announcing his service had finished and he was back in town. Caden was over the moon with joy, but Josephine felt a pang of unease at the news. Jace had aged notably during his time away. His physique was now more robust, his muscles defined, which became apparent under the thin fabric of his t-shirt. When he shrugged off his jacket, Josephine found her eyes lingering unwillingly on her former flame. Jace caught her fleeting glance, though he gave no indication of it. Now the dread of her friend inadvertently spilling the beans to her husband about their affair was even stronger. Whenever they went out with their friends, the woman couldn't relax until her husband came home, and she knew everything was all right. It made her anxious, because everyone knows that a sober man will blurt out what's on his mind when he's had a few drinks. It seemed like Jace was trying to make up for lost time. He was constantly hanging around Caden and Josephine's house, always calling Caden to go somewhere and chat, and attempting to assist his former mistress with their child. But the truth was, Josephine didn't trust herself the most in this situation. She knew there had to be a reason why she had cheated on her husband twice with this man, and why she still felt drawn to him, despite her efforts to suppress it. The intimacy she craved with her former lover had invaded her dreams so frequently since his return that it was driving her mad. Caden noticed that his wife was becoming more edgy and uptight. Josephine would snap at him over trivial matters and get angry with their young daughter, even though she was just a toddler. The man thought that it was simply fatigue from being an active and sociable wife on maternity leave, and that the demands of everyday life were weighing her down. Post-work, he devoted himself to easing his wife's burdens, either by taking their daughter out for a stroll or by dropping in on his folks. Unfortunately, these kind gestures didn't lighten her load. Josephine's spirits sank lower with each of her husband's well-intentioned acts. She reproached herself for her thoughts straying towards another, particularly when her husband was so devoted, always looking after her and their family. Meanwhile, Jace was stirring up trouble. Unseen by others, he would corner his ex-lover, daring to touch her and attempting a kiss. Each time, she narrowly avoided his advances, although deep inside, part of her yearned to give in. "Stop it," she whispered fiercely into his ear, struggling to pry his hands from her waist. "Have you lost your mind?" "Yes, driven by my love for you," he responded with a smirk. "I'll tell my husband about your advances," she threatened. "And then what? Remember, we've been down this road before. Jace taunted with a sly grin. Who do you think he'll believe? Realizing the futility in her rebuttals, Josephine felt trapped. Jace's words held the ominous power to shatter her marital life, with mere whispers to her spouse. They consummated their love on Caden's 30th birthday. Just like in his student days, he couldn't handle alcohol, and after a few hours of merrymaking, he dozed off and delved into his 10th dream. On this special day, Josephine went all out. She rented a house on the outskirts of the city, invited many of her husband's buddies, and set up a lavish feast. The crowd was so large that not everyone could fit around the table. The atmosphere was lively and boisterous, and Caden was overjoyed as he drowned himself in a sea of drinks. Jace seized the moment and pestered Josephine the second she emerged from the room where she had tucked Caden in. The woman's willpower crumbled under the influence. She had had far too much to drink, and in her intoxicated state, she succumbed to her former lover without much resistance. The next day, Josephine spotted Jace smoking on the porch. He tried to restrain her by grabbing her arms, but she wriggled free. She berated herself once more for her actions and her weak resolve. "It's all over," the man uttered, seething with anger. "Just let it go. It was all a mistake. Please, forget it," she pleaded with a desperate gaze. "Why are you being so obstinate?" "You enjoyed every moment," the respondent chuckled. "I suppose Caden isn't that satisfying between the sheets," he added, sneeringly. Josephine yanked her hand away once more and finally managed to free herself. But as they both turned around, they were met with the sight of Caden standing in the doorway. His face immediately revealed that he had heard everything and, of course, comprehended the situation. The man was livid, but he couldn't quite determine who he was more furious with. With a primal yell, he lunged at his friend, pummeling him with his fists as he toppled him into the snow. A brawl ensued, where Jace, with his superior combat skills, clearly had the upper hand. Caden's fury clouded his judgment, causing him to blindly strike out. Their friends intervened and separated the men, though the combatants continued hurling insults and desperately attempted to break free from their rescuer's grasp. Caden had shifted his gaze to his wife. Tears of rage welled up in his eyes, making Josephine's heart clench. She was painfully aware of the deep love Caden bore for her, yet she had still managed to inflict this wound upon him. In that moment, she felt a searing self-loathing. Caden, at first, was seized by the urge to storm into the apartment and hurl out every belonging of his unfaithful spouse. However, a coworker cautioned him against such impulsive actions, reminding him that Josephine held a wild card, their daughter, whom she could easily use to keep him from seeing. Caden reasoned that this idea was logical and tried to find peace, but immediately filed for divorce. However, Josephine did not even think about forbidding her husband from seeing their daughter. She felt great shame for her actions, realizing that she had hurt Caden, and promised not to repeat such behavior. She repeatedly asked him for forgiveness, but Caden remained adamant. The double betrayal, especially in the presence of their friends, deeply offended him. He just couldn't find the strength to forgive his wife for such a transgression. In addition, communication with Jace was cut off, as well as with his ex-wife. Josephine returned to her parents' house to find a job. She needed to find someone who could take care of their child, and although many disapproved of her actions, they still supported her. For a long time, she tried to find happiness in her personal life. Every man she came across turned out to be a liar. Often, when she returned home after a tiring day at work, she put her daughter to bed and cried inconsolably, burying her face in the pillow.